Welcome to this week's episode of the Good Girl Rebellion podcast. My name's Anna Campbell, and I am very excited to welcome my guest today, who is Marie O'Neill. Marie is a holistic psychotherapist, a spiritual coach, and founder of Space for the Soul, where she helps highly sensitive people heal from chronic stress, burnout, and trauma by working with the body, the nervous system, mind, and soul. Her work combines psychotherapy, mindful self-compassion, and nervous system regulation, helping people understand that their sensitivity isn't something to overcome, but something to understand. I first heard Marie speak at a networking event, and I really wanted to get her on the podcast because I felt so many of us could relate to her experience, particularly of high-functioning burnout, and the way that she reframes it, what we often think of as a weakness, but looking at it more as a source of wisdom. So I'm really looking forward to sharing this conversation with you. Thank you for joining me, Marie.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I love it.
Thank you. I'm glad. I'm really appreciated your messages. You're like, oh, I really like this. That was great. It was lovely to hear that. So maybe we start out a little bit around your story, because that was what you when I first met you, that was what you were talking about, and you were explaining, your story of how you came to understand what high functioning burnout is because it was what you were struggling with, really, I suppose. So you shared that it took around 8 years to get answers. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey through this?
Yeah, so everything I do in my work kind of weaves together my personal experience as well as my clinical experience in working with people. So I was in a state of high functioning burnout without realizing the state of chronic stress, and through that I developed what you would call a stress induced illness. So a lot of these types of conditions that we typically refer to as kind of mystery illnesses or chronic conditions that don't seem to have a clear cause are often really caused by chronic stress and nervous system dysregulation over time. And yeah, that's what was happening to me. And I'm sure anyone out there who's experienced similar can relate to that kind of revolving door patient. You go from one specialist to another. And the NHS here in the UK are fantastic if you have something serious that they can quickly diagnose and treat, which, for me, it was a case of getting referred for scans, getting referred for tests. But as soon as they could rule out anything really serious, that was it. They were done with me. It was like, oh, we can't help you. You just have to kind of get on with things, have some painkillers and just learn to live with it, kind of thing. And I can't tell you how many people I've heard from, I've spoken to who've experienced similar. And yeah, it can just take such a long time before you get anywhere else from that. And even when you do, often what you get is just a fancier name for your symptoms, but not actually an explanation as to what caused it, or more crucially, how to get out of it. So yeah, that was my experience as well.
Yeah. And so I think one of the things that's really key with this is that, and I think whether women who are listening have what would be called what you were talking about, high functioning burnout, or just generally symptoms of just holding everything together, kind of. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I think completely. It's kind of a bit on a spectrum, isn't it? I think
it's totally a sliding scale from, do you just have kind of like the tense jaw, the shoulders up to here, poor sleep? That could just be sort of like the beginnings of chronic stress, and just kind of living in that braced position most of the time, to all the way over the other side where maybe you have an actual diagnosed condition, severe pain or other symptoms. And yeah, that can be more debilitating.
Yeah, absolutely. But we've just kind of talked a little bit about what it looks like and what it feels like. So what does it look like from the outside when you've got this, during that period where you were struggling to find this diagnosis?
I mean, for me, I don't think most people could see it. I kept my physical health stuff mostly to myself. It wasn't something that I wanted to kind of share about. I was very high functioning, just going about my life, working, doing family stuff, doing all the obligations as normal. And, I think a lot of the time, especially with a lot of good girl conditioning, that's kind of people get stuck in this loop of I have to keep functioning. Other people need me, breaking down is not an option. So while the
Yeah.
body is perhaps signaling, all isn't well here, something is, not being replenished, you're kind of running on empty a bit. The conditioning is very much like, that doesn't matter because I cannot stop. I don't have time. The show must go on, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And while I was listening to you speak at this event, I was frantically writing notes down. And one of the things that you said really stayed with me. And you basically said, I didn't feel stressed. I felt normal. And I thought this was how life was meant to be. Can you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's again, a clear marker of chronic stress. It's that it's chronic, so we don't actually realize that it's anything unusual. It's not unusual. It's become the daily state. And of course, I could recognize when I was in periods of heightened stress, where something, if I was really anxious, something big was happening. But in between those moments, I didn't kind of down regulate. I never reached a kind of calm baseline. My baseline was already quite vigilant, quite braced. And I mean, I do think a lot of people out there are similar. So I probably was hearing a lot of the same. If you speak to people, it's kind of, oh, yeah, I'm really busy, really quite stressed. But after this week, things will settle down a bit. And it's like, it's become so normalized to live in a state of heightened stress that
Yeah.
it's almost more unusual for people to be really, really calm. And it's only like if you go on a yoga retreat or something, you really take time out to like, oh, now I feel so zen. That it's hard to kind of realize that that's our natural state. That's how we want to be most of the time.
Hmm. Absolutely. And so, if anyone listening hasn't actually heard of the term high functioning burnout, what would the definition actually be?
Yeah, so I mean, some people kind of describe it as a stage before you reach the state that most people would recognize as burnout, which is kind of when you can't function, when you're really absolutely fatigued and you can't do your kind of normal daily activities. Whereas high functioning is, as I said, where it doesn't often show really on the outside, like the activity goes on, but on the inside, there's a deep sense of depletion, tiredness that just gets sort of overruled constantly. And I see it a little bit as like being in debt, but energetically. So you keep paying out, but you've not got anything coming in. You're in the red, and it's a matter of time until that's going to become more obvious, or there might be some consequences down the line. But in that meantime, you can be up and running, functioning as though everything is fine. But that's where these kind of symptoms and stuff maybe start to creep in.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. And when you were speaking before, you mentioned about, and I thought this was such an interesting way of putting it. You mentioned about internal gaslighting. Um, and I think if people think about it, they're probably like, yes, especially I think the good girls, it's very much that just keep going, all of that stuff. But what did you mean by internal gaslighting and how did that actually show up for you?
Yeah, exactly that. As you say, I think it's the internalized messages that we have picked up over time where we've learned how we need to be in order to be perceived as good, what's expected of us. The expectations that maybe we perceive are coming from others, but have actually been internalized as to coming from ourselves now about I must do this, people expect this of me. What kind of person would I be if I couldn't show up to this and that? And so it becomes almost like a blaming ourselves rather than being able to see that actually that's a bit too much to be putting on, too many expectations on one person.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
sometimes like to ask clients about, if you had a partner who spoke to you the way you speak to yourself or expected of you all the things that you expect of yourself, would your friends and family be concerned? And like that's usually quite telling how, when we think about that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really great question, isn't it? Because I think it's so easy to get stuck in these very invisible rules about just keep going, keep doing it, keep, that you have to keep everything together, and all of that we have for ourselves. I think without sometimes even realizing, it's back to that conditioning again, isn't it? That we've just learnt, we've internalized these things, and so it just feels like, well, this is how it is.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that's, the key. Like real good conditioning is like water to a fish. We don't even know it's there because it is normal to us.
Yeah, yeah, that's such a great way of putting it. But I wonder if women are particularly vulnerable to this kind of, we've got to push through, we've got to normalize exhaustion. Has that been the case that you found in terms of the clients that you work with, or is that something you know about in the research at all?
Yeah, I do think so, or certainly in this way. I think there might be, there's cultural stereotypes playing part as well. So there might be different internalized demands on women compared to men. But of course, as women, we come from a long history of oppression and this kind of inequality and trying to overcome and often I think overprove like our right to be in places, to be, in different jobs and different workplaces, to have the ability to do it all. But then we also haven't fully achieved, equality when it comes to domestic tasks, and women still end up with a lot of free labor. And, then a lot of women do have this, again, conditioning about being good, being nice, being pretty whilst doing all these things. That, it does quickly add up to pretty unmanageable.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think a lot of us are in this kind of in-betweeny generation where there was more possibility in terms of women being able to have their own money and have jobs and have bank accounts and things like that hadn't really been a thing before. But there still was this idea of having it all meant doing it all, basically. It's like you
Exactly.
can have a
Yeah.
family and you can have a career and you can have this and that and the other, but actually that load wasn't spread, and it
Yeah.
was not, and that's obviously going to cause a lot of stress, I think.
Yeah. Yeah,
Trying to
absolutely.
hold all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think women are often the kind of shock absorbers as well in society. That's one of Gabor Mate's expressions that he uses, because then when there is stress in the family, when there's disharmony, women tend to be the ones who sort of feel that, who go in to do a lot of the emotional work to regulate other people. And that takes a toll as well.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, and one thing I found fascinating when we were talking about sensitivity in the nervous system, and you talked about discovering that sensitivity wasn't something to overcome, but something to understand. Can you tell us a little bit more about that idea about sensitivity?
Yeah, so in the research, it's shown that about 15 to 20% of people have a more sensitive nervous system and are more susceptible, just pick up more, notice more, have more sensory input come through, and also process that sensory input on a deeper level. And oftentimes that's kind of talked about and described as like it's a difference, it's something that can make life quite hard, but it's something that, if you learn to live with it, you can be okay, kind of thing. And I feel like that's, yeah, I don't love that approach. I mean, it does of course come with more work because there is more to process, there is more stimulus coming in, and we do need to, I think, work harder at regulating the nervous system, taking more rest, having more time to replenish. But it also comes with so many great skills, like the depth of processing, which is specifically attuned to regions of the brain that process emotional communication, things like empathy, meaning making, being able to problem solve at quite advanced levels. Those are all also linked to high sensitivity within the nervous system. So I don't think that those things are defects, that we need to overcompensate for. They are probably there for good reason. And, there's a lot of, there's a lot of good can come from high sensitivity as well. And I think it's more a mismatch with society, which is built on everybody, being as productive as possible, being able to function and just keep pushing through and not needing so much. So it's really incompatible with that. But which one is the problem? Is it the natural way of being able to read your environment and respond? Or is it the capacity, is it the society that expects you to not do that, to just get on with things Monday to Friday, regardless how you feel?
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? That's so true, because there's very much a kind of judgment, like you say, of like, just get on with it, it's fine, so, you don't be so sensitive or whatever kinds of things that come out. But actually,
people
you're
who
right.
can more easily do that, might be more rewarded in society.
Yeah, absolutely. And so how did understanding your own nervous system change the way you saw yourself then?
Yeah, I think it just helped, to give permission to just allow myself to be as I am. And instead of thinking, oh, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do these things? Or why do I feel so tired? I used to ask myself that a lot. Like, I would come home from work and I would think, oh, well, I've only been at work. Like, it's still early afternoon or whatever. And why have I not got any energy to make dinner and, do all the normal things? But just having that understanding that my nervous system processes more information throughout the day. So that's going to come at an energetic cost. Or if I go out, in busy environments, crowds, a lot of noise, that really is tiring. So knowing that, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to do it. Of course, if it's something fun or something I really want to do, I will do it, but I'll think about when it's worth it. I'll think about how long will I stay there. And I certainly won't plan to go to something else super busy and crowded after. I will plan to come home and relax and replenish and make sure that I get the recovery time that I need.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think, it is things like noise and busy environments and that kind of stimulation that, as you say, you're not going to necessarily avoid, because it could be the fun things as well. But I think it's interesting, that idea of planning around it, how not doing too much of that all at once.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to just kind of think, well, if there's time in the day, then I can do it. I'm free here, so I can just go and do this other thing. But actually, energetically, that doesn't work, because I might have already done 3 exhausting things. And even though there's time left in the day, there's no energy left for a 4th exhausting thing. That's when I need recovery time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think as well, I mean, I know it's not the same thing specifically, but I think when someone is an introvert versus an extrovert, extroverts get their energy from being around people, whereas introverts, they're fine with other people, but they also need that time to kind of look after themselves in that time alone, almost, or just with very close family, I think. So I think it's around kind of understanding yourself, isn't it? And just managing it just optimally for yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. And some sensitive people are extroverts, although a minority. So about 70% of sensitive people are introverts, and it kind of fits quite well with that description of what we expect. But 30% of sensitive people are extroverts, and so they do need and want more interaction, stimulation, but still they have that sensitivity and do need to also take time to replenish and recover as well. So exactly, like knowing yourself and knowing what works for you and what you need, and having permission, even internally, to take what you need, to take that rest and recovery time, and not feel like that's lazy or that's selfish, or you should always be on the go and looking out for other people and all this kind of yeah, typical good girl conditioning.
Absolutely. I think that's interesting because, like you say, I wouldn't necessarily have thought about extroverts as, as having this as well. And I think then maybe people might, if they are in that situation where they're extrovert, but they're finding that they struggle with it, it's nice to hear that it can happen. It can kind of come in that combination, and it still be true.
Yeah, and everyone exists again on a spectrum, so even with the highly sensitive, it's not an exact diagnosis. It's not seen as a condition. It's just a kind of a way of identifying yourself, and everybody is some level of sensitive. So somebody might not quite be over the line to be considered highly sensitive, but they might be moderately sensitive, and they might be less sensitive. But everybody's going to have a limit. Everybody's going to have their own ways that how they need to recover and what they need to replenish themselves and how to feel well. That isn't always going to be taken into account in functioning in the world.
Mm, mm. And I know that you work particularly quite holistically in terms of what you do and listening to the body and all of that. So you talked about your body trying to communicate with you when it was in that very highly stressed state. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time that's where this kind of disconnection shows up. So in our mind, we have this conditioning, we run on these old beliefs that, this is who I have to be, this is what I have to do. As we said earlier, without questioning that, without recognizing that even is conditioning, we just think this is how it is, right? So we're running on this program. And meanwhile, our body and our nervous system can sense that, this isn't quite right. Like, I'm not living really fully as myself. I'm just trying to be something or someone. And I think, in some ways, the nervous system will read that as a kind of internalized threat. Like, it's not safe to be myself in the world. The body keeps being pushed beyond capacity. If you're running on no energy and you keep going, a lot of the time, even ignoring like simple bodily needs, for rest or ignoring hunger, just kind of going on. Like, again, the nervous system is going to read that as, this is a state of crisis. We're not being able to rest. There's no food. There's no kind of, I can't trust that my needs are being taken care of. So it goes into a state of high alert, and the body might be sort of trying to notify, it's showing those effects. But a lot of the time we don't understand the language of the body. We don't necessarily, like, we probably can read hunger cues, but if there's like a persistent stomach, pain, or there's, different problems with, chronic pain conditions, and there's actually no tissue damage, there's no virus or something there, that it's just the body that's trying to sound an alarm to try and alert that something is not right, like something doesn't feel good, there's no alignment here between who I am and how I'm living. But that message doesn't always like come through that clearly. So it's how do we almost like heal that relationship with ourselves to become a whole being that we can feel when something is wrong, instead of continuing on, soldiering on, and ignoring those signals when they try to come through.
Yeah, I think that's such a key one, isn't it? Because I mean, I remember when I first did my coaching training, I did Wayfinder life coach training with Martha Beck, and one of the things that she talks about is the body compass. So it's like your body knows, even just in terms of like, is this the right decision or the wrong decision? And I know for myself, I was so disconnected from it. I couldn't even feel the intuitions, and I'm keyed much more into it now, I think, because I've done that work that you're talking about, really, just starting to notice it a little bit more and understand what those signals are, because the signals could be there, but if we're just ignoring them or we're just pushing through and, all of that, because we're so busy just functioning and just doing, that we're not listening to our bodies. I think that's what can happen, isn't it, when stress becomes more chronic stress or long-term stress, is that it almost becomes a new normal, doesn't it, when there's pains and aches and tiredness and things.
Yeah, exactly. And if you think about it from a survival perspective, if you actually are in a life or death situation, you're not going to stop and think, oh, how am I feeling? Or am I a bit hungry? Like, you are just running for your life. So it is adaptive in that way, but we're not supposed to be stuck in that state indefinitely.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's move into talking about reclaiming joy, because I loved when you were talking about this. You spoke about reclaiming joy rather than trying to fix yourself specifically. And I really loved that way of framing it. What changed when you stopped being at war with yourself?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, it was like being able to prioritize myself and come out of that kind of sense of obligation. And instead of just thinking, like, once I get to the bottom of the to-do list, maybe then I can do something nice for myself, like a treat. Like, we have this kind of attitude, like the weekend we get to do nice things, or at the end of the long work day, but then there's no energy left to do those things. So to actually be able to, like, center myself in my own life and think about, why am I here? What is it I want? And that has to be kind of central to us existing and being here. And even though most of us, we also have to make a living, and yes, we do have obligations, but having those be in alignment with a bigger picture of why we're here and what we actually want out of life is quite a different alignment to just kind of trying to get through the tasks.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It makes such a big difference, doesn't it? And also, I think it can affect our relationships and our family life. So did those change during this process for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was able to be more present and more relaxed in myself. And so, of course, that's going to be nicer for everyone.
Yeah. Did you find yourself, or maybe you're not talking for yourself, but generally with clients, do people find it difficult? Because it's almost like once we realize this and understand that we need to change how we interact with people, that there may be some people who are now suddenly expecting us to be this person, this superwoman or something, when we've kind of realized that we can't be that. I wonder if that creates some issues of like having to kind of almost renegotiate our roles in our families.
Yeah, I think it often can do. When people are in a relationship with that version of ourselves, the conditioned version, there's almost like these invisible contracts about, this is how we are with each other, this is who you are for me, this is what I expect from you. So when we start to change, inevitably it does affect relationships as well. And that can be, yeah, it can be really difficult, and can be one of those things that keep us then more stuck or make us reluctant to want to make these changes. Because what if people don't like me if I'm different? What if I am more myself, and then this person likes me when I'm the good girl who does everything, or who doesn't speak up, or whatever. So it needs a lot of nervous system work to come in, because oftentimes, like, we know when we need to set a boundary, or the changes we want to make. But when the body and nervous system interprets that as dangerous, because it might kind of rock the boat in those relationships, then of course it's scary, and we need to bring in a lot of internal safety and stability so that we can start to learn to make those changes, and hopefully have corrective experiences, where someone goes, yeah, that's good, and support us in our change. But if we have people around who don't want to support that, yeah, that can become a whole other negotiation.
Yeah, I think it can be a difficult thing. It's back to that good conditioning and the fish in the water, isn't it? It's We're so used to being this way, and really, our body and our nervous system has it, like you're saying, it's that coping, it's that high level functioning when we shouldn't be. it can be a difficult thing to set that down. And I can imagine that's why a lot of people need to work with you in a number of different ways, because there's the physical things and there's the symptoms, but then equally there's the other things that we need to let go as well, isn't there, in terms of how we interact with people, how we interact with ourselves, that internal gaslighting, all of it. There's just so much to unpack, isn't there?
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Yeah, it really is.
But for the women who are listening, who maybe is thinking, oh no, this sounds like me and I hadn't really realised it, or I was just ignoring it a little bit, what are the signs that people might recognise in themselves?
Oh, well, it can be a lot of things, just that sense of, obviously feeling stressed is a big one, but even that kind of maybe disconnection from calm, and realizing that there aren't very many moments when you can just really kind of switch off and just feel at peace. Disconnection from self, feeling like a lot of decision fatigue or difficulty kind of knowing what you want, because that's a big sign of just being disconnected from your true self or your kind of inner self. That if you're asked about something, just thinking like, well, running it through, checking like, what would other people want me to say? What should I want? What would be best for my family, for this, for that? But being sort of disconnected from like, what do I really want? What feels really true and right for me? I think those are some major kind of signs. And little niggles as well, like maybe a problem with sleeping, getting a lot of either aches or pains or just kind of general tension, a lot of exhaustion, things like that.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I had a conversation on the podcast with Ange Cameron about proving, and she was talking about rest, and I was like, oh yeah, that's fine. I do all of that. And I realized I would, I'd book a massage or something at the end of a project, and I'd be like, yeah, I'm feeling really good about myself. And then I suddenly realized I was rewarding myself with rest. Do you know what I mean? I was like,
Yes.
but what I actually probably needed was something in the middle of the project, not right at the end. And I think
or
so
even
many of
first,
us,
like,
yeah,
support
absolutely. Or
yourself.
just,
You do the project. Yeah.
I know. And I was thinking to myself, oh yeah, I do all of that. And then I was suddenly like, oh no, there's still more to do here, because I'm still in that feeling of like, once I've done the work, then I can rest. And obviously there's that's true, but equally it's not just about once everything's over, because everything's never over, is it? It's like It's like you said, it's like, well, when this busy period is over, then I get to do this. But there's always the next thing, isn't there?
And it's how you place yourself again in your life. Are you just living for the scraps, or the rewards that you can gain once you prove that you're good enough? Or are you good enough already and getting to live and design your life around how you actually want and need that to be?
Yeah. Oh, that's so important. That is so important. What is one thing that women could do this week if they really resonate with this conversation and think, oh, okay, I need to notice this. I need to do something.
Yeah, I would probably say to stop criticizing themselves. Because again, this can open up to a whole lot of judgment, like, oh no, I have been living like this. I have been abandoning myself. I have this good girl conditioning or whatever. So then, we can pile on a lot of blame around that and a lot of criticizing ourselves. We should be better. We should make changes. And, usually there's good reason why we learn these behaviors in the first place. Like, they help us in some way. So that's not really fair. And also, I've never really seen anyone create any meaningful change through criticism. I think it's such a toxic way of being that it's really unhelpful to try and bring in that more self-compassion and understanding that, yeah, okay, maybe I do want to make some changes. maybe I deserve that. Maybe I want to learn to see that I deserve that, and just go really gently, really small steps towards self-acceptance that can lead to wanting to make that change from a place of self-worth and not from a place of inner blame and criticism.
Mm. Yeah, I do love that, because I do think we can go to those extremes, can't we? It's like, I need to get everything done, and like, oh, blaming self, and saying,
It's
oh, I
basically,
think,
yeah, trying to solve the problem with even more of the same mentality, the same approach that we're trying to undo.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Once we spot the patterns, it's about giving ourselves grace and just saying, well, this is something that is being learned and taught over decades, this, and it will take a little bit of time maybe to unravel. And it's not about self-judgment, is it? It's about, what do I need?
Yeah, yeah, completely.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, I really appreciated this conversation. I've got a few last questions. What's something that you wish more women understood about burnout and sensitivity, or about themselves?
Yeah, I think that focus shift, coming away from thinking that these things are personal failures, again, it's that self-blame, self-criticism, to being able to recognize that these are systemic problems. These are issues in our society, the way that we can be incompatible with that productivity culture, and recognizing that's not a personal weakness or a failure that we need to overcome, but it's actually just a recognition that maybe this way of being isn't in our best interest, maybe isn't healthy, and maybe we can be allowed to create other ways of being in the world that are more rewarding.
Mm, yeah, I love that. And so, what does become possible when women stop overriding themselves and start listening to themselves instead?
A life on your own terms and a more positive relationship with yourself, where you can be your own best friend and support system, so that you are able to, yeah, have your own back through life's ups and downs. Of course, I would love to sit here and say that life will always be great, you'll always be happy. But sadly, I can't make those kinds of promises. And, it's not really feasible, because everybody goes through difficult things, things happen that we don't want. And it's how we support ourselves through that. It's how we take care of ourselves and be able to be with ourselves through our own emotional experiences in life.
Mm-hmm. Mm. I love that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me on the podcast. What kind of work do you do with women? Can we just talk a little bit about, or, well, anyone, not just women, but just what kind of work do you do when you're help supporting people with this?
Yeah, so I use my own framework that I have developed. I call it the Sensitive Soul Framework. And it's basically drawing on my own personal experience, what helped me recover from my own chronic illness and high functioning burnout and stress, and also what I've seen working with countless clients that I've worked with. So I can offer people one-to-one support in a one-to-one program working through the framework. And I also have a group program, which I run twice a year, where people can work through the framework as a group. And it's all based around kind of holistic understanding of ourselves. So we work with ourselves on 4 different levels. We work with the nervous system, the body, the mind, and the soul. So trying to heal these kind of internal separation and disconnection that's happened when we've learned to overrule ourselves or stop trusting ourselves in order to perform this kind of good girl or this kind of self that we believe is acceptable, and learn to reclaim more of our true self and learn to care for that and live in a way that's ultimately more aligned and more integrated with all these different parts of ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. So where can people find you if they want to find out more about what you're doing?
Yeah, my website is spaceforthesoul.co.uk, and I've also got on there a free masterclass that people can watch if they want to learn more about how I work. And also I'm quite active on Instagram, so people can find me there and look at the sort of things that I talk about there.
Fabulous. What's your handle on Instagram?
It's Space for the Soul Therapy.
Okay. Fabulous. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming to share with us today. I think so many people will resonate with it, as I did when I was with you at that networking event. Thank you for listening to the Good Girl Rebellion podcast. Just to let you know that the book is now available on Audible worldwide, so you can now listen to the Good Girl Rebellion book. And thank you so much to everyone who's already purchased it. It got to number 5 in the Audible charts, so I really do appreciate you for listening. And yeah, I will see you again next week.